of Ender Lilies. So
your review of Ender Lilies.
Well, Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights. I will be reviewing it for Vooks. Mike, you've beaten the game, and Swinny, you have been the drug peddler. You got us both into this game.
I know.
Yeah,
well, he doesn't.
And then bailed. I'm like, they're hooked. Now
he doesn't do, he's a good drug dealer. He doesn't use his own supply. He's smart.
He kind of did in this case. I guess he's doing it with us. We're in a circle. He does a shot, and then he's like, I've got the willpower to not continue.
Well, he said he did, but maybe all he did was watch some YouTube videos, pretended that he actually played the game just to get us hooked on it. Doesn't even own the game.
Don't expose our secrets.
So I'll read the line that he wrote just because he's been hammering me the whole episode on it. So the Bigwig crew take the plunge into the ethereal waters of the newest Metroidvania sensation, Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights. What did you think?
That's been like that for 2 weeks because we were originally or last week at least.
I should say Quietus of the Nights. And I would probably go further and say like newest Metroidvania, Dark Souls light, dark fantasy sensation. I think that accurately explains the game. So, do we want to start just, Mike, with the actual Metroidvania component of this game?
Sure.
So, like I said in the intro, I feel like this is a Metroidvania / Dark Souls light game set in a dark fantasy setting. I think that summarizes the game pretty well. Would you agree?
I would. I actually so very, very light Dark Souls. It kind of reminds me of Vigil.
Light. That's what I'm going to call it in the review.
It's very Souls light, and I say Souls light because one of the key things about Dark Souls or Souls like games, I personally think, is the concept that when you collect experience or souls, whatever the case may be, and then if you die, you lose that experience. So there's that risk reward. And there's that constant tension. This game doesn't have that.
I think you need to elaborate on that, especially if people haven't played Souls, right?
Okay.
So I have all these enemies set in my world. If I kill them, they're permanently dead. But if I revive, they also revive, right?
That's right, yeah. So if you go to heal up at one of the bonfires in Dark Souls, all the enemies reset.
Yeah, yes, or here like
mechanic,
park benches are like the bonfires for this game. But the key thing there is like, and you needed to add it to what you said, which is you get experience points. They build up in Dark Souls. And then you have this constant trade-off. Do I keep pushing forward and get even more experience points? Or do I go back, revive my health or whatever it is, but then that revives all the enemies. So then it kind of adds another layer of difficulty. So it's this constant tension you have of, do I push forward or do I go back and like revive myself and then reset everything and upgrade, my level? And this game kind of like, and this is why I call it like a Souls light, because you always absorb all the XP in this game. And I think it then kind of, weakens the Souls sort of treatment of this game. And I think another feature of like Souls, a Souls light is you have to say it's the difficulty level. And it's not saying this game's impossible, but the game's like challenging at times. And like, I think Swinny said it well, I think the first time you spoke about this game, which is you can't just run through enemies. Like you sort of can do that late in the game, but at least probably the first half of the game, if not a little bit more, you just can't, run through anyone. You will die if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. And, parrying, all that kind of stuff, the mechanics of the actual game. I think that's another element of like a Souls-like or a Souls light. And this game has it as well. But maybe we're just starting on the Metroidvania component. So as a Metroidvania, because, you and I and all three of us actually are big Metroidvania fans, how did you find it like satisfying from a Metroidvania component, or were the sort of things you were disappointed about?
No, I personally found it extremely satisfying. The most satisfying thing, I think, was the fact that you get double jump pretty much at the start of the game.
You're always a big fan of that.
The fucking double
jump.
Well,
I love the double jump mechanic, and there's certain games where you get it so late in the game, then you're like, oh man, seriously? I wish I had this from the start. And of course, then they have other gates to keep you from being able to go to other parts of the level. So it's not like they give you all the abilities right off the bat, because you'd lose the satisfaction of unlocking those. And there are, of course, and literally at the very start of the game, there is a gate you can't open till the end of the game. And I love that. I love that concept. I love knowing that I can come back to it. And straight away you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. I bet I can come back to this towards the end of the game. And you do, and it's satisfying in that sense. The one thing that I found, which was kind of weird about, and I think it's more to do with me being an idiot, is there's certain doors that you get an ability to open. And I didn't realize that the ability that you get can be used to open all those kinds of doors because they looked a bit different.
What?
So at the end of the game, I'm sitting there going, how the heck do I open these last ones?
Oh
Am I
my
missing an
God.
ability or something? And then I'm like, oh, I see. There's a bit of a puzzle element where you have to, run from a different area and you have to use that same ability, but you need to power it up.
Yeah.
In order to do it. I won't spoil what it is. But in any case, I found it quite satisfying finding the different abilities and then applying them. The game is very forgiving in the sense that it lets you go back to previous areas with fast travel. But at the same time, it doesn't make things super easy for you. You have to memorize where certain things were. There's no. So if I think of something like, oh my gosh, the name escapes me again. Hollow Knight. You have the ability to put pins on the map, which were super handy in remembering where a certain thing was, where you got to come back later because you need an ability. This doesn't have that. And I think that's a good trade-off between we'll let you go to places real quick, but we're not going to tell you or let you remember exactly where things are. You have to do that on your own. So that was pretty cool.
And I think like Hollow Knight, that's Western, so it's an Australian developed game. This is Japanese, and I feel like it wears the sort of Japanese nature on its sleeve with those type of things. Like being a bit more old school in that way.
Is Livewire Japanese? You sure?
Yeah.
The people who developed this are Japanese.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a Japanese game. I didn't know that either. I don't know.
Oh, really?
Why.
I felt like it was very Japanese all the way through. That's interesting.
Look, the characters and stuff, but something about it's really weird, and I don't know what it was. It kind of reminded me of, I don't know, Ori and the Blind Forest mixed with a bit of Hollow Knight, which are all, Western games.
Yeah, okay.
But
no, I don't know. I always felt it was a Japanese game, and then seeing the credits, it's like all Japanese people. It's like, okay, well, it's consistent with what I thought. But
yeah, I had no idea. For some reason, I thought it would have been a European developer.
Okay, interesting.
Like an indie European developer.
So, for me, the Metroidvania component of this game is by far the strongest suit that it has, and I think pretty much can't be obviously challenged in terms of like being flawed. Like one thing I always find with Metroidvania is, it's this weird trade-off of like, it's actually kind of linear, a lot of Metroidvanias. Like I think at its core, a Metroidvania in a weird way is a very linear structure, right? It's just like a puzzle that you can solve the puzzle really in one way for the most part. Now, I don't want to go on tangent about, segment breaking and all this other kind of stuff, which
sequence breaking.
Yeah, sequence breaking, which, isn't necessarily intentionally a part of the games, and now they have become part of the games, and this game does have that as well. But like I was always trying to say is, mostly Metroidvanias are actually like a puzzle that you're meant to solve in a certain order for the most part, but they do it in a way that doesn't feel like it is linear, right? And I think this game does that so well. Whenever I play a Metroidvania, the very first thing I always do is go to the left, which is, very classic. If you go back to NES with Metroid, you obviously have to go left to get the morph ball. And I do feel like, this game wears its influences on its sleeve as well. Like, you're not up to its 20, but there's so many things in this game which are like direct references to me to like Dark Souls, with like some of the enemies and what they do and where they're at and what they call areas. And then Metroid as well, like where, from the start, from the left, like the whole way it's structured, it's sort of like almost like a bit of a joke to the player if they're in on it about, that is a thing that Metroidvanias do. It's like you have to go left rather than right. And then in this game, there's nothing until really the final part of the entire game, in reality, that you can finally go left at the start of the game.
So you can you can spoil me on this. Do you get a morph ball?
No.
Just imagine a little girl in a morph ball.
No, there's no ability like that. And
I wasn't saying the ability, it was just a bad joke.
And just on that, that is actually a really cool thing that this game does. So you have a relic system in this game, so you can carry different abilities, and it's to a point where you can actually replace your main weapon in the game with another weapon if that's what you choose to do, and you can level up those relics. And I got to like level 100 from an experience point of view, finish the game 100%, But, from a Relics point of view, a lot of them were really underpowered still. And it would have taken me ages to grind out level 6, which is the max level for the Relics. And I'm talking about you have a sword from the start pretty much, but then you can change that sword to other weapons all the way through the game if that's what you choose to do, if you feel more, that suits your style. But they've actually then integrated that into the metroidvania component. So if you want to get 100%, you actually need to use the relics because they enhance mobility just a little bit more. And there's no other way to get to certain areas other than using the relics that enhance your mobility just fractionally to then be able to actually hit some of the areas you need to jump to, climb to, do whatever. So,
by the way, I think you're talking about spirits. By the way,
spirits. Okay,
quick
sorry.
clarification.
No,
there are relics.
Say that.
There are relics as well, and the point you just made about needing to use the spirits to get to certain parts, it also helps if you then have certain relics on top of that. So relics are basically objects that you hold, and you can have up to a certain number of slots. So, you can think of them as rings in other games. The difference being that you collect items that increase the number of slots that you can have available, and then you can mix and match. So if you wanted to build a particular type, or if you're in a particular area, like say there's an underwater area where you'll benefit from things that are geared towards better combat underwater, faster movement underwater, that kind of stuff, you'd swap those out. And then you have spirits, which, as you said, are the ones that you use. They're basically your abilities. And you can chop and change those as much as you want. And you also get 2 different slots that you can... So you get 3 spirits per slot, and there's 2 different slots. So you can basically create 2 builds, which can come in handy.
There's 3 slots in 2 builds.
There's 3 slots in 2 builds, yes.
Yeah,
so you can have 2 different builds. I think that's what I said. And then you have 3 slots that you can put things into.
I'm listening to this, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but I'm like... It would be the most confusing thing in someone else.
It's going to be super confusing. The point is you get 3 abilities that you can pick from. You can upgrade those 3 abilities independently, and they get more powerful as you upgrade them with the resources that you find in the world. And that's probably the key thing to remember. You tend to not swap between... I didn't really swap between them too much, to be honest. I created my build, and that was the build I kind of went with. But I did experiment quite a bit, and there were certain bosses where the stuff that I was using didn't work so well, and other bosses where I'm like, wow, this strategy works so much better. And then I'd mix and match them. There was an element of, oh, should I invest my points into this particular thing? Because it is... And I remember asking Swinny this. I'm like, hey, do you get a lot of these things?
Like trying to min-max it.
This upgrade material so I can min-max it? Or is it... And I didn't realize that I was actually ahead of it at the time, so I probably knew more than he did. You get a fair amount for some of this stuff. So there's 2 types of upgrades. There's the ones... Actually, technically, there's 3. There's your Umbral Knight, which is like the very first attack ability that you get. And that needs a specific type of upgrade material to be able to upgrade it, and you kind of... It's almost staggered through the progress of the game. You can't artificially get it early. You kind of upgrade that ability in a way as you progress the game, because otherwise you can't get to the area to get those items. And then the other spirits are sort of split into 2 main parts. One which is like... I think there's 5 or 6 main spirits that you have, and they use one type of upgrade material, and then you have the rest of them, which... I wouldn't call them the weaker ones, but they're more secondary type of attacks. But you can use those as your primary as well. You can mix and match. That's the beauty of this game. You can mix and match so many different abilities. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, without getting into the jargon, it's kind of... It's almost a bit like weapons. It's like you can select kind of 3 weapons, sort of. Like
3 weapons / abilities, because not all are weapons. So one of them, for example, the Western Merchant, is a crow that you summon.
But that is a weapon, though,
which is technically a weapon, but you don't control it per se, other than it hovers around you, and it not randomly, but keeps attacking enemies.
It's basically familiar from...
It's a familiar, it's a familiar summon. But you get... The other thing that's probably worth noting is some of the spirits have unlimited uses. So, for example, your main Umbral Knight attack that you get at the start, you can use it as much as you want. Whereas other ones have very limited uses. Some, as low as only 10 uses. Now, they can recharge. You can, when you kill enemies, it can randomly recharge. It recharges every time you go to rest. There's relics you can equip to increase the number of times you can use the spirit. But in any case, it's quite varied. And of course, usually the very powerful ones have very limited uses, whereas the ones that aren't, if you could call it quite as powerful, you get more uses out of.
Yeah. And so like essentially you don't pick a class from the start of the game like you would in, say, a Dark Souls or something like that. But throughout the game, you can kind of craft your build and what you want to be. And it's probably the bit that I want to then like lead into around the sort of Dark Soulsy nature of the game versus like, you know, the combat and mechanics of the game. I find that, and you know, this is starting to get a little bit spoilery, so maybe skip ahead 5-10 minutes. But you know, probably halfway through the game, you get projectiles. You know, so like think like the crow and stuff like that, and you know, other just direct projectiles. And I felt like once you start to get projectiles in this game, the game becomes so much easier, in my view. Like once I had the crow on all the time, and I powered the crow up, and the crow just fucking destroys people.
I get the feeling. I get the feeling the crow is the kind of was. It was almost like intended to be something everyone uses. Honestly,
but I think it's too strong, though. I think, look, honestly, I wouldn't even mind if they changed the balancing of the game. Like I felt like the crow just makes it drops it down from a difficulty level
to some extent, but it doesn't make it super easy. It doesn't make it a boss killer. It doesn't make it, and it's gimped because you can't really control exactly where it shoots all of the time. So there's a lot of the times
it's always shooting
it
and
randomly shoots projectiles at shit I don't even want it to shoot at and just waste it.
I thought of it like Nier Automata or Nier, where essentially it's something that is just like a companion attack.
Exactly, like that. Yeah.
Like I understand what you're saying, but
sure.
I found that with the way they design some of the aerial enemies, they're quite frustrating to hit until you get that.
Sure.
So it kind of felt like, well, okay, so this is what I'm meant to use against this annoying
I use the
crows
witch
in the area
more than the crow. So the witch has, and it is pretty cool because the crow is like a general. It kind of randomly hits different parts of the area. It's automated. There's another ability, and I won't mention all the names because it's probably a bit of a spoiler as well, where it basically shoots things just across the screen, kind of like shooting arrows or something in a straight line. And that changes the dynamic of how you play the game as well, because you have to jump and shoot instead of, you know, automatically doing things. And there's another ability which throws these balls, these balls of magic that also allow you to sort of target. It's got a bit of targeting, and it allows you to shoot upwards or downwards, etc. And it does drastically change, I feel, the way you play the game. And as you said, if you go from just playing it purely melee, which you can, it's a different feel of the game. And to get to certain enemies are a lot harder because you got to jump, you got to hit them in the air, you got to jump back down and make sure you don't fall to your death, all this kind of shit. But that's the beauty of it, I think, the fact that you can mix and match to suit your gameplay style, and you can experiment. And I actually did. In a lot of games I found I never did that, whereas in this game I'm like, I'll try all these different abilities, and it was really cool just to play with them.
No, it was really fantastic. And then like probably wrapping it up to a bit, you know, and again, we're in a little bit of spoiler territory, so we'll, you know, skip ahead maybe 5 minutes again. You know, so there are multiple endings to this game. Don't want to totally give it away. Probably the one thing I would say is I felt, and I guess just my point is, you know, if you take maybe a quarter of the way through the game and then maybe halfway through the game, I think that's the most challenging part of the game. Once you get certain spirits, relics, the game overall, I think, gets a lot easier. And then a game, for me at least, and it's all personal, I'm not the greatest gamer either, I feel like the game spikes up again right at the end, like with the bosses, like the final bosses, like not the ending A or the easier endings, but if you want to do everything in this game, 100% it, there's just a few parts that are a bit like, oh, this is a bit of a spike. You know, I have to try this, you know, a dozen times to be able to beat this boss. And it wasn't kind of like everything else I was getting through relatively straightforward. Like, or it's just like learning the patterns. And then once I've learned that, I can beat it pretty much, you know, the next time round.
But I had more difficulty with some of the maybe earlier to mid-game bosses than the final boss. I wouldn't say the final boss was easy, but it happened to be that the type of attacks I was using was really efficient against him. That even on the good ending, which requires extra steps, and again, I won't spoil anything. But it's a longer fight, is all I could spoil. Even that wasn't as much as a problem, which actually kind of surprised me, to be honest. I thought it'd be way more difficult, but it happened to be, and maybe a small, not a spoiler, but a small hint. The witch ability. So one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that you get, I forget the name of it unfortunately, but you get the bar on the left-hand side, the spirit counter thing.
Spirit gauge, I think it's called.
Spirit gauge, yeah. So as you attack, it fills the spirit gauge up.
Yeah.
And then each of your spirits has a special ability that you can activate, which, by the way, slightly annoyed me at how you activate it, because you got to press up on the stick and then attack. So a lot of the times I was activating it without wanting to, because naturally when I was like trying to jump up into the air and stuff, I was activating it.
Yeah,
but that's a Castlevania thing. So
yeah, look, I get it. You get used to it, but it didn't feel natural, if that makes sense, because naturally I would press up on the stick to do that, and I just kept wasting the ability when I didn't want to use it, or I kept using another ability and wasting it when I was trying to save the one that I was trying to actually use at the right moment. And there is one, the witch one, where it causes like things to go outwards from your character. The thing is, for aerial enemies, if you hit them at that central point, every single projectile hits them, and it just causes a huge amount of damage. So there's like these little hacky things that are quite cool too.
So in terms of like the game, like I love this game. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 on my books review.
Nice.
I think like it's not anything original. I just think it's so well executed. You can play through the main campaign of the game. It's like, I don't know, about 10, 12 hours-ish, I think. And then if you want 100% it, it's probably maybe double that. Depends on how quick you are with stuff like that. Probably took me a bit longer because I was just really trying to soak it all in. So I really loved it. How about you, Mike? Where did you land on it?
Yeah, loved it. I would probably give it about the same. Maybe an 8.5, 9-ish if I had to round it up.
If I could do the percentages, it would probably be 8.7.
It'd be about that. There are a few things where, again, I think it's down to user stupidity more than anything else. Where I'm like, so that's how you do that part. Fair enough. There's a few things that I think you mentioned it. Getting to certain parts of the map, if you want to 100% it, is a pain. You're given the tools to do it, but I almost feel like you almost need to break the game. But you don't. It just feels like it almost needs to break the game for you to get to those things. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a natural way to get there. Like, did the developers really intend this? I guess they did. It's weird. And there was one frustration, which again, I reckon I would boil it down to user error, where the very end of the game, the area was a pain in the butt. And then let's just say there's an item that you get, which makes it a hell of a lot easier. And I didn't know that until I came back later. I'm like, I
think we're running a little
anyway,
long. So
sorry.
I think you need to get the hook out for Mike.
He's very passionate about it.
It's a great game. About this game. It's really cool. Love it to bits. Grab it. I grabbed it at full price, and I do not regret it at all. I think it's worth every dollar.
I look forward to getting back to it.
I just like how Mike just keeps going on and on with stuff, even though we're like, come on, let's go on, let's wrap up.
This is supposed to be your review, no less.
No, it's our review. All right. Next